The Talmud says that Jesus is boiling in feces and Gehenom. That's because Jesus went against God. He spoke against the sages. And he was someone that entices the public to sin.
He did claim to be God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. Because that's what God's name is I am. And when Jesus said that, that's when the Jews said he's a blasphemer. They said he's claiming to be God, kill him.
Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah.
We do say that Christ is God. We say Christ is God. We say Christ is Lord. We believe that Christ is just as much God as the Father and the Holy Spirit. You know, and he did claim to be God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. Because that's what God's name is I am.
Except the I am in Greek, which Jesus didn't speak, is not equivalent to the Hebrew I am of Exodus. The Greek eİmι is closer in meaning to the African American English I am, as spoken by the Hebrew Israelites of Central and West Harlem, than the actual Hebrew of the ancient Near East. Regardless, even serious Christian scholars like James Dunn, while himself believing Jesus to be God's begotten Son, nevertheless argues that the I am sayings found in John reflect a later interpretive theology and not words actually spoken by the Jesus of history.
The inference is inescapable that the style is that of the evangelist or of the evangelist's tradition rather than that of Jesus. And it can hardly be judged other than scarcely credible that Jesus was remembered as having uttered the I am assertions, so vividly descriptive and self-assertive, and yet not one of the synoptic evangelists bothered to recall or use them. How could such self-identifying assertions made by Jesus during his mission have been so ignored or blanked out by the earlier gospel writers? The only obvious conclusion is that the I am sayings, so characteristic of John's gospel and so distinctive of John's gospel, cannot be traced back to Jesus himself. This is Jesus' tradition developed well beyond its roots in Jesus' own mission.
He did claim to be God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. Because that's what God's name is I am. And when Jesus said that, that's when the Jews said he's a blasphemer. They said he's claiming to be God, kill him.
This is simply not true. The Pharisees attempted to have Jesus crucified for the same reason the Jews always sought to murder their prophets, because the prophets would admonish them for their hypocrisy and disobedience before Allah. It was sufficient justification for the Pharisees to charge Jesus with blasphemy that he dared insist he was the Messiah to be obeyed. In other words, the Jews conspired to have Jesus killed not because he said, I am the Lord your God, worship me, but because he said, I am a prophet of God, you've no right to defy me. Today's rabbis too, the Pharisees of our day mind you, do not hide the reason for their contempt for Jesus, because he held them in contempt.
He brings Yoshke, he brings Jesus, and he says, where are you? He says, I'm in Tzo'al Otachat. I am in boiling feces. He goes, why? Why are you in boiling feces? You just told me to convert. Seems like a righteous guy. He goes, because I went against the rabbis. Jesus himself says, I am in Gehenom forever, in Tzo'al Otachat, in poop that's boiling, lava of poop forever. Why? I went against the rabbis. All agree he went against the rabbis.
You bring up that verse where you say, I am. Does that, can you really say that that's a source of him claiming to be God?
Absolutely. Well, that's God's name.
Am?
And that's what he meant. And I am.
That's God's name?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's why it was blasphemous. He said, before Abraham was, I am. And what does that mean? It means that, and you know, that's what God revealed his name to be. And so and Jesus was Jewish. And he was saying that to the Jews. Of course, he was in Judea. He was in Israel, or the land of Israel. And so when he said that to them, he knew what he was saying. They knew what he was saying. And that's why he was killed. That's why they wanted him dead. And that's why they wanted Barabbas instead of Jesus, because they said he's a blasphemer. He's a heretic. He's claiming to be God. And so he did claim to be God.
No, he didn't. We've already shown how the learned of Christianity dismiss the I am assertions, whatever their implications, as later interpolations which
cannot be traced back to Jesus himself.
And we've shown how the learned of Judaism still gloat of having dispatched Jesus to boiling feces for an eternity, for the crime of challenging their priestly authority. This is what sufficed them for blasphemy, not any non-existent claim to divinity.
In hell there is a place that is a huge pool of waste. What people dumped in a bathroom, that's what it is. And there are people who are being judged there that they have to be in this waste as a part of their punishment. For what crime? People go there. Someone that makes fun at the words of the kosher chachamim, make fun at what they teach Torah, meaning they make fun at Hashem, is going to end up in that place. Who went there? JC, the idol of Christian.
So what's the main point? The main point is that
at no point, like, there's nothing that we could see where Jesus said, "Worship me" specifically. And again, like, if we're gonna follow, because we're going to say, like, we follow in his footsteps, Jesus worshipped God. You know, he put his head to the floor.
That's right.
Jesus never asked to be worshipped as God, while he did himself worship God, just like all true prophets, just like his true Muslim followers today. Jesus
put his head to the floor.
That's right.
And because Pauline Christians cannot clearly ground their man-God Christology, let alone their centuries later developed Trinitarian theology, in what they claim to possess of Jesus' words, fragments parsimoniously preserved, they resort to ambiguous metaphysical metaphors. Let's be honest, the authors of John weren't so bold as to openly come out and claim that Jesus claimed to be God. For any one of the 4 New Testament Gospels to have dared unambiguously claim that Jesus claimed divinity would have lent them open to charges of giving false witness and being given over to heresy. After all, the Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark and Luke lack the overtly mystical man-God overtones of John. Hence the ambiguity and allegory, as it's only through surreptitious means that the question of is he, isn't he, did he, didn't he claim divinity gives John's pandering to paganism plausible deniability. Conversely, the Bible's monotheistic pronouncements are less equivocal, more crystal in their clarity, such as the very first commandment given in Exodus and repeated elsewhere in Mark, Isaiah and Deuteronomy.
I am the Lord your God. You shall not have any other God but me.
Christian convert to Islam, the brilliant Professor Gary Miller, makes an astute observation here.
Do you know, if you took all the words of Jesus reported in the Bible and eliminate the duplications, because you have the same story basically told 4 times, if you eliminate the duplications, the total of all the words of Jesus do not even fill 2 columns of a newspaper. There's not very many words. So if he said these different things, you don't really have a lot of work to look down and find them.
And none of this handful of texts is an explicit claim of deity. All quotations are implicit. That is, they require interpretation. In other words, we are told what Jesus said, and then told what he meant. And so our method takes an obvious form. It is not our intention or our obligation to reinterpret the Bible. We are satisfied to merely verify that Christian interpretations are insufficient, ambiguous, or impossible. That is, we mean to argue 3 things. That in some places where the meaning of a quotation is clear, it is still insufficient to prove that Jesus claimed equality with God. Or that in other places quotations cited are open to different interpretations. They are ambiguous. Or still other quotations of Jesus have been given interpretations which are impossible. In these 3 cases, it means the evidence is either inadequate, inconclusive, or unacceptable.
The Quran too contains verses that are explicit and clear, as well as ambiguous and superficially unclear, and calls out those who forego the former for the latter. Ibn Kathir comments,
That is why Allah the Exalted said, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ. As for those in whose hearts is deviation, فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. They follow that of it which is ambiguous, meaning they take hold of the ambiguous passages which they distort toward their corrupt aims and apply to their false interpretations, since the ambiguity of the wording allows for such. As for the clear verses, they have no share in them, because those verses refute them and stand as a proof against them. such as the Christians citing as evidence of Jesus' divinity that the Quran says that Jesus is a spirit from Allah. وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ وَرُوحٌ مِّنْهُ, and his word which he cast to Mary, and a spirit from him, while they neglect to cite Allah's clear saying, إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا عَبْدٌ أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَيْهِ, he is but a servant whom we blessed, or his saying, إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ آدَمَ خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ قَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونَ. The likeness of Jesus before Allah is as the likeness of Adam. He created him from dust, then said to him, be, and he was. And other decisive verses which explicitly state that he is one of Allah's created beings, a servant and a messenger from among Allah's messengers.
You either believe that Christ was God,
No, you don't.
or he wasn't.
Well, he wasn't.
But there's really no middle ground.
Yes, there is.
He said he was God.
He did not.
So either he said he was God and he was, and he rose from the dead,
He didn't even die.
or he wasn't, and he died, and that was it.
It most certainly was not. This isn't a zero-sum game, Senor Fuentes. There is, of course, a true middle ground between deifying Jesus on the one hand and denying him on the other. For he was neither God made flesh, as per the Christians is blasphemy, nor is Jesus boiling in feces, as per the blasphemy of the Jews. He was but the penultimate of God's prophets. Believing in him and the prophet who succeeded him is a win-win. Nothing to lose.
وإذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم أنت قلت للناس اتخذوني وأمي إلهين من دون الله قال سبحانك ما يكون لي أن أقول ما ليس لي بحق إن كنت قلته فقد علمته تعلم ما في نفسي ولا أعلم ما في نفسك إنك أنت علام الغيوب ما قلت لهم إلا ما أمرتني به أن اعبدوا الله ربي وربكم وكنت عليهم شهيدا ما دمت فيهم فلما توفيتني كنت أنت الرقيب عليهم وأنت على كل شيء شهيد إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم إن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم.
If you're enjoying our content or benefiting from it at all, then please help us help you defend and spread the truth, even with a donation that is small. And make sure to also like, share, and hit subscribe to ensure your charity lives on long after we cease to be alive. And may Allah bless you, and in all good grant you increase, and upon his messenger Muhammad be blessings of peace.